Tuesday, May 24th. I'd like to call this Planning and Zoning Workshop meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please?
Timmons.
Here.
Mutha.
Here.
Snydow.
Here.
McCall. Guerra.
Here.
James.
Here.
Chase.
Here. Thank you. We have a quorum. Next, citizen comments. At this time, if any members of the public would like to speak, you may come up now. We ask that you fill out a citizen comments form and that you limit your time to 3 minutes and that you state your name when you come up to the podium. Does anyone who would like to speak? They may come up now. Seeing none, I will close citizen comments. Citizen comments is now closed. Item number 4, general discussion. 4B, continued discussion regarding code amendments to the M1, M2, and M3 zoning districts.
Cool. So we do have the building official online. His name is Mr. Stubbins. I didn't see him there for a moment. So this is a continuation of our discussion that we had last time in terms of considering making amendments to how a manufacturing home is attached to a foundation and what sort of foundations we're wanting to consider. It was brought forward by Commissioner Snydow, and we invited Mr. Stubbins, our building official, because I do not know the answers, and he can help out better. So, what questions specifically do y'all have related to if we're going to consider this?
Well, I think the question that's been circling for us is, and that I had talked to San Marcos, I mentioned that they said that a manufactured home placed on a permanent foundation could be moved, could be removed and placed elsewhere. And so I want to confirm that with our building inspector, our building department.
Gary, were you able to hear us?
I think what the question was that San Marcos has stated that that a permanent foundation, that the manufactured home can be moved. Is that correct?
Yes. The actual manufactured home, right.
I'm sorry, for the record, my name is Gary Stubbins. I'm the building official for the city of Kyle. Yes, they are able to be removed. Basically what they do is they put down a slab. Sometimes they have runners to go underneath the metal beams. Most of the time that we've issued permits for, they actually use a series of footers rather than using a full foundation. But they are able to be removed because they're placed on that foundation to begin with.
And just to follow up, so the removal process, is it just as easy, or is it more complex than if there was not a fixed foundation, if it was cinder blocks or such, or is it about the same process either way, moving the home?
From my understanding, it's pretty much the same process, just in reverse.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you.
And I actually did a little research before I came on HUD Title I funding for repairs for manufactured homes. And they have a loan program that actually you don't, for up to $7,500, you don't even have to have equity in the home. It would have to be on a permanent foundation, but it said you can own it or lease it, which would indicate to me that someone who's leasing their space could actually do repairs on their home if it's on a permanent foundation and get a HUD Title I loan, which would be hugely beneficial to people with aging manufactured homes. So I guess I'm bringing it up because I think it's another point in favor of that.
You said it's a loan?
It is a loan.
Okay.
It's a Title I loan. It is done through lenders who do these type of lending, and it's guaranteed by HUD, by FHA loan. And I think the maximum is $25,000, and on a manufactured home, I think the term is, the term on a permanent home is 20 years, and the term on a manufactured home is 15 years. And it can only be used for, like, you can't put in a swimming pool, or you can't do something, but it is for roofs and HVAC and windows and ADA access, I mean, all kinds of things. So it would be an opportunity for people who are living in manufactured homes to be able to do repairs, which they cannot access right now.
You said 25,000 up to, or up to
I
70?
believe it's 25,000. I believe the house would then have to have equity, but if it's on a permanent foundation, it may start accruing equity instead of depreciating. I don't know that. But I do think that, the 7,500, it said, and again, I'm just reading online their criteria, so, but their 7,500 indicated that you wouldn't even have to have equity in the house.
Oh, okay.
And it would not affect their original note or deed. So I thought it was great, because I was excited to find that.
Without equity, that makes more sense. Okay. What other questions do y'all have?
Well, for you specifically.
Okay.
Just to recap from last time we talked about this.
Mhm.
The M1, the M2, the M3. The M1 was for when we were annexing
An
an
existing
project already in.
Right, so they'd be vested at county standards.
Right, so changes here wouldn't necessarily be applicable to them.
Correct.
Okay, M2 is for a property the person owns. That would be a district where the individual homeowner would own the land. And then M3 would be where the person is leasing the land to put their home on.
That, the difference between M2 and M3, one is owned, one is leased, and let me double check
Okay.
which one is which. I always get them mixed up, but that is the difference between them. M2 are lots sold and conveyed to individual lot owners. So
Okay.
a fee simple subdivision with manufactured homes. Like a KV home subdivision except manufactured homes. And then M3 is for lease. They got private roads, private infrastructure internally. We'd only require technically the access points that are required per the fire code. We don't allow other public streets to tie into them because they're a private subdivision, which goes against everything I feel about subdivision networking for streets, but I understand why. Because we want to limit the boundaries of where those are, from who maintains what. So,
Yes, sir.
I have a question. If we did adopt this and move forward with this, is there a possibility that we could reach out to the county and ask them to consider adopting similar standards? We can't make them, but can we just say, hey, we're doing this and we would love to see you do this because we may be annexing something someday?
it starts getting into, that starts making things a little bit murky because
Okay.
that starts dictating building code in the county, which is also a subset, or somewhat intertwined with the zoning code. And neither one of those really, they don't exist in the county per state law.
Okay,
So, which is why if you're a lot of people like to live out in the county because there's the bare minimum on rules, except for like if you have CC&Rs for your neighborhood or whatever.
Sure.
You deed restrictions, so.
My assumption is that we're not doing M1 anymore,
No.
right? That was just,
Right.
so that, and this isn't retroactive,
Correct.
so this is moving forward. So if moving forward, we're not doing M1, county isn't gonna,
okay.
wouldn't want to, and I agree, they probably have zero interest in doing that. Counties tend to be a lot less restrictive for
Yeah.
specific reasons. But if we're not doing any more M1, I think that kind of just goes out the door anyways.
Yes. Yeah. The question really is, do we support this? And if we do we support it for both M2 and M3? Or just one or the other?
If we're moving forward with it, it's my opinion, and this is really ultimately up to y'all to consider and provide direction on, I guess. But definitely, it's a lot easier to push on the M2, I would think, with its being fee simple, because you're more likely to own the land long term, or for longer periods. You're not in there for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, then you're gone. If you're leasing, which would be M3. So I think it'd be easier to change the code for M2 than M3. I think we would get a lot of pushback from developers on the M3. But that's just from internal side, when, you know, if someone wants to do manufactured homes, are we okay with it, and then we tell them that. Or if word gets out, word gets out, but like, we might start,
Okay,
Yeah.
I have a question then. So then, our current amount of M2 and M3, we have both in the city, correct?
yes.
So, that's something we already have, and as far as I understand, basically, none of those are fixed foundations.
None of them are forced to be fixed foundations.
Did some choose to?
I don't believe so. Gary might be able to go say, you know, like, correct me if I am wrong, though.
In the
Gary,
subdivisions?
in your review, when we're looking at the manufactured homes, it's usually you and I that are looking at them from a code review standpoint. Are any of them on a fixed foundation, like pier and beam or slab? I don't think many of them are. Gary, you're muted.
Sorry about that. No, I'd say the majority of them are on piers. Very, very, very rarely do we ever see anything on the actual fixed foundation or any type of runner. And like I said before, regardless, we do get it stamped by a professional engineer because we do have a lot of compressive soils, sand, clay around, so we require that regardless.
The piers that we usually see right now, are they more like a stacked cinder block kind of design of sorts, or something similar?
Yes, majority of them are. They start off with a footing, depending, it could be a 24-inch, 30-inch, 36-inch, depending on the size and style of the manufactured home that's being installed. But then they do have cinder block piers that go on top of those. On occasion, I have seen engineered metal beams, but I think I've only done maybe 2 of those in the last year. But the majority of them are cinder block.
Okay.
And I had a question too. When they come in to get a permit for these, do they bring in the proof that the actual manufactured home is a HUD certified product in terms of building standards and HVAC and all that? They're supposed to have a red tag on them.
Correct. We do get a HUD number from them because we don't have any jurisdiction over a HUD building. I mean, we can't go in there and state, you know, you gotta put tempered glass in certain locations, smoke detectors, so on and so forth. That's all regulated by a third-party entity. But as far as the piers are concerned, like I said before, because we have such expansive soils, different types of soils around, we do a per parcel, and we require that it's site-specific, and that the PE stamps it accordingly.
So are we getting manufactured homes in town that are not meeting HUD standards for building?
We receive when they pull a permit, we make sure that they have a HUD number on it. So that basically means that it's been inspected by a third party.
Okay, great.
So I guess really the only issue you have on M3 is pouring a slab would be just size, right?
Right. So if you're, go ahead, continue with your idea, sorry.
Well, my assumption would be if I'm a developer, let me put my developer hat on real
Right.
quick, and I'm developing this product, I'm gonna maximize that slab pour no matter what, make it the largest size that can fit within the lot. I could see why they would have some pushback on that.
And to solidify that point a little bit more, you know, especially if you're a M3 developer and people move their houses on and off, we get, for example, in the Sunset Ridge neighborhood, even the original phase, we will occasionally get them, someone will pick up their house and take it with them, and we get a new one there. And so that means if the house footprint doesn't fit, if it had a permanent foundation before, it would really limit which house could fit there, the next one. On top of the setbacks, the impervious cover, that maximums and stuff like that. So that's part of my.
But if
And
they
they
have
would
footers and everything already there, isn't
Yes.
that going to be another consideration for the next unit? I mean, wouldn't it be just as much of a consideration?
Yeah, but footers, in my mind, and I'm looking at, thinking about this just from an
Right.
everyday kind of
No,
person.
please do.
Again, I'm not the building official, I'm not an inspector, but footers are one thing, because they're at ground level, but whenever you start going above ground, vertical with your foundation, the house pretty much, I would think, needs to match that. And so it starts to limit the marketability of the site, especially if it's a project that actually owns the land underneath and they're trying to get people in and pay rent. So,
It's easy to pull footers out. It's not easy or cheap
Right.
to pull a foundation out, report. And then I'm thinking, if somebody does move and the foundation is damaged, they have to get that foundation recertified to then allow a new home to sit on it to meet the requirements that we're asking for. So I could see where M3 might not be the best place to put this.
Yeah, we definitely want to hear from each of you, just to, how you're leaning on this, so we can know how to move forward. Just me personally, I like, as a general idea, to let the market decide. To let the market decide. Hopefully, throughout time, you'll end up having multiple options. But more often than not, the cheapest option is the one chosen. And so when your city has enough of something, such as our houses with garages in the front, eventually you make a rule saying, people can still buy that kind of house. There's plenty of our city. But now if we keep making more houses, we might want to do something different. Here in this situation too, we've got M2, we've got M3 without these permanent foundations. I don't know how much more our city's going to have. I don't know how many future M2, M3 projects we're going to have. But I think for M2 specifically, this is the right move. For M3, I understand both ways. I am happy to go with the rest of the commission on this, but personally, I do support it for M2.
And for me, I'm thinking about the people living in those units. And I'm thinking about the people both in M2 and 3, particularly M3, I guess, in a way that, this is their only housing option, or they'd be in a single-family home. And typically, these individuals are a workforce. There are people that make less than they can afford, than that they can even get in, maybe into an apartment. And so they get less than desirable rates and terms. Typically, people that are low and very low income do not have ideal credit, so the rates and terms are higher. And when you're doing for sale by owner and finance by owner, I don't know what those rates and terms might be. But, and I don't know what the criteria is for if, if somebody misses a payment or something like that, because it's not regulated. So I know, and I do come from a government background, but I'm pro-business, so I kind of feel, and because our mission is low and very low income populations, in a lot of ways, we have to kind of be watching out for that, because they can be the recipients of, or the people that live in that environment that no one's watching out for them. You and I know how to watch out for ourselves, or hopefully. But anyway, so I actually support it in both places because it would allow those people in M3 to get a loan to fix their unit and that type of thing. But I totally understand if the rest of the commissioners do not. I respect that, and I won't argue it. I won't
So-
let it go.
And I get where you're coming from. Who do you think's paying for that foundation in M3?
More than likely those people,
Yeah.
but they actually can get a real loan too.
Yeah.
And in the difference in the rates and terms between FHA and VA and private financing,
Oh, yeah, I know.
when you have no idea, when you don't have good credit, it's a government loan is a secure loan, like, okay, for, let's say, I'm in rural, let's say, and when you're one of our borrowers. If you have a life crisis, you lose a job, someone dies of cancer, you can come to us, and we have your loan for 30 years. You can come to us and say, we've had this life thing happen. We can do a moratorium on your loan, and we can re-amortize your loan when you're back. We can do that. Well, not like that. It's a lot of paperwork and it's a lot of process, but we can do that. I'm not sure the private sector does that.
Yeah, I guess my question would be though, is if they're moving, let's say this is a new buy, right? First time buyer,
Right.
new purchase, and let's say all they can find is an M3 and we require that foundation. And they're getting an FHA secured loan to make the purchase, not an upgrade,
Right.
not a refinance.
Right.
This is a purchase. How does that work with a leased land? I guess that's what I'm trying to.
I'm not sure that FHA can do the purchase on an M3 because
Yeah.
it's very possible that they have to, I haven't researched that. I know for us, they have to own the land and the thing.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking of down the road when people are, a lot of people who are our borrowers are on disability, may never, it's not like entry-level housing. This may be all they can afford their whole life. We have a lot of borrowers. We had a lady come and speak in public comment who bought their home and they live in it, we're the old Farmers Home Administration, so they live in it their entire lives. And so it's not like first-time homebuyer type thing. They are, but they're also their last-time homebuyer.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of trying to watch out for them in being able to do repairs down the road and maintain their property and, that type of thing.
So I guess I'm trying to figure out how, in that situation, how it will benefit them to
To be on a foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah. They can actually get the Title I, the FHA Title I rehab money.
So let's say they live in a community, without a foundation, and they're saying, hey, I want to go to Kyle, we're at M3, this section, it's
Right,
leased land. Is the FHA going to finance that house to be able to, number one, pick it up and move it, and then do any repairs to it? I guess how does a person go from point A to point B?
Right.
Using those funds?
We actually, if they're coming to us for repairs, we can actually put the unit on a permanent foundation
Yeah.
with the loan. Or with the grant. We also have grants for that, but.
Yeah, and if they're leasing the land, they might be able to go to the owner to say,
Right.
hey, can I put a permanent foundation down? I just want to make sure we're not boxing out individuals, and I know that's not your
Right.
intention at all.
Right.
But I want to make sure if we put this on M3, we're not boxing out individuals who can't do that, do
Right.
what you're implying, which is, be on a leased piece of land and be able to put a foundation down using FHA
Yeah.
dollars. If we're forcing M3, I mean, if I were an owner of an M3, I'd leave the lot without a poured foundation until I have a buyer, and then I'm going to charge them to pour that foundation.
Right.
Where's that person going to get that money from if they're moving from
Right.
another location onto there?
And so the developer is typically also selling the homes, right? The manufactured homes. Are they also selling the manufactured homes?
I'm not exactly sure in terms of the M3 if the original homes going on site are owned or if they have an option to buy them from the developer. Now, the developer can then probably buy them as part of stipulation of the rent, like if putting a lien on it or something, I would suspect, if they're behind on their rent or something like that. But I don't know. I think most of the time people own their homes already and they bring them on site.
And they move them on site?
Yeah. So, we saw a lot of that with the Roberts Resorts one up there, BB Road, Lakeside Crossing. A lot of the time, people already own the residences and they're bringing them on site.
move there.
And we've seen some of that with Sunset Ridge too. But the original phase of Sunset Ridge is built out. They're loading homes on the first phase of section 2 of phase 2 right now. They're adding them. and they're in design and, or constructing the phase 2, B, C, and D right now behind
Okay.
there. So,
Does anybody else
Well,
have?
I'll yield to
some
that.
thoughts?
I mean, it's completely, as I said,
No,
you
please.
guys know more about this than I do, honestly. I only know the finance and people side.
My hesitation with M3, with the poured foundation is if people can and do pick up, you're putting it on leased property, you pick up your home and move, the next person coming in, you're limiting the property owner
yeah.
the ability, you've got to have something that fits that mold or not. Now, if it's on a pier and beam and you can move the footers easily, that's a whole different story.
Okay.
So you're allowing that kind of transition to happen. If you put your house there, something happens, you got to move it, somebody else can come in without buying the property and either use the existing footers or move them to where they need to be. You do that with a foundation, you're pretty much stuck. Either you fit that property, which may mean having to get a totally new home to put there, or you telling the existing property owner, sorry, you're stuck with this, you're gonna have to find somebody and you're gonna have to turn somebody away because they don't have something that's gonna fit there. I think for M2, I don't have any heartburn with it at all. I think it's a good idea because the idea is that people own the land, and if they're gonna put a poured foundation on land that they own, that's great, that's more of a vested interest for them to do it. And if they sell it, then that means the person that's buying it knows that, and they're the ones that's gonna have to deal with that. I think it's a little different with M3. Now, how often that's gonna happen, I don't know, but I want people to have the ability to own a home and to have a home wherever they want to put it and be able to do that. I think it's a great idea. But you don't want to, in the process of doing that, limit what's available to go in
Right.
that type of a situation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So-
I want to take it from the reverse context. 'Cause I actually have the opposite view of what I've been hearing here, which is that I don't care if we do it for M2 or not. That doesn't matter to me. But I think it's great. It has benefit. But if not, these are people who own fee simple their lots. Meh. But where it does come into me is when it comes into leased lots with private roads and infrastructure. And we keep talking about the mobility of these homes, but if you're leasing it, chances are you're not moving your home as often as you might if you had the choice to move your home. I think that's where the benefit actually comes in. We talk about not having to own or lease in order to get a $7,500 loan to fix things. That's a big deal. Take after a winter storm, like the ability to access those funds for folks, like that's a really important thing we can make sure our city does. Our city has the access for, because that's where I see a lot of the problems coming in. Like I do quite a bit of work around communities that have this kind of thing here in Hays County, but also in the Austin area. And I've seen what happens when you have when you have the ability for them not to invest in it, and folks don't get those options to reinvest in their own home. Because I think that you made, Commissioner Simon, a great point, which is this might be their only home. This might be the one they are in for the point in time of their life, if they can continue to lease it at that amount of money. And I think that to me is the important part. If owners want to do whatever, I think owners should have as many options as possible. When it comes to these things that are being used for economic gain, for certain people to lease to other people, we have to put as much restrictions as possible, because they will only have the minimum amount they need to in order to make the most amount of money.
Okay. Thank you. Martha, do you have anything to say before I? Okay. So just, I think from what I've heard so far, what I would like to see on a voting agenda item is, even, I'm not saying we're going one direction or the other, but I would like for both the recommendation for M2 and M3, I'd prefer those to be separate votes, but it could be one item. Or it could be two items. And we could do separate votes in that one item though. And then that will very much give us a bit more time to think through this personally. We've had the discussions. We're not going to make any decisions today. We're just discussing it. And so that way, when it does come up to a voting meeting, we can vote on it. It might be the same vote for M2 and M3, but either make them two items or just one item that we can separate as we need to. But I would like to see both those. I think we're all good in letting M1 go. It wouldn't make a difference in our opinion if we changed anything there or not. Okay, so my question to staff is there anything else you need from us at this point before we go to the voting meeting?
I think it's pretty clear, kind of generally what direction we're looking at, and when we put this on a voting meeting, we'll have every opportunity to discuss and vote and take motions and all that kind of fun stuff. If things need to be edited or you want direction specifically on the dais.
Absolutely.
And stuff like that too, so, we can draft, it's actually relatively simple. What I'm thinking is gonna be a relatively simple code amendment. It's as simple as permanent foundations are required in M2.
Yes, sir.
And that's it. So, I don't believe, I mean, I might take a look at, what's the definition of permanent foundation? But I'll probably coordinate with Gary on that, I think, from a building code perspective, just to make sure there's no, issues between zoning and building. Anytime our zoning and building code can match
Yeah.
as much as possible, it's always a good thing.
It's
'Cause,
ideal.
Yes,
Yeah.
so,
And I think I had some HUD criteria that I sent you. They had some specs on 3 different types of foundations.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find that again, but one was a slab, one was wood, and maybe one was a wall, concrete wall or something. I don't know, I can't recall. But there were 3 different specs that they provided as examples of what would be a permanent foundation.
Thank you all. Is there any other discussion before we move on to the next item? Okay, thank you. Can we let Gary go, or?
Gary, it's not that you need my permission to leave, but I think we got everything covered we needed, so I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your help.
Awesome, man. Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
You too.
Okay, great. Item number 4C, discussion regarding possible conditional use process for gas stations, car washes, and self-storage facilities. This was my item. Is there anything you want to say before I just give my perspective?
From a how we process a conditional use permit, we already have that process in place.
Okay.
From whether it would probably be a public hearing, which we already have those for like height exceptions that council can consider ultimately. It's a very easy process of how you make it happen. The question, if we decide that we want to move forward with making the gas station ordinance more nuanced through a conditional use permit, is what are those nuances?
Right.
So, and that's something that needs to be considered. And I don't know the answer.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I wanted to discuss today. So that's why I asked that this be on the agenda. I typically don't like putting something on an agenda without having a pretty concrete answer to present to you, and I was hoping I would have that by now, but I don't. So that's the situation we're in. Wasn't that long ago, we as P&Z talked about the restrictions for car washes, gas stations, and self-storage units. And then after that it went to us, it went to council, and it did pass. And so that is our rules going forward currently. The concern that I had was, there may be a situation where Kyle would want an exception to be made. We would want there to be an option for, something that was more than just a gas station was what I had in my mind. An HEB that wanted to put a gas station in. If Rudy's Barbecue wanted to have their gas pumps with it. If, this ordinance treats a Buc-ee's just like a 2-pump mom and pop gas station. And so there might be certain situations where where someone should be able to say, could we please consider coming in, even though we're within a mile of another gas station or so far within a car wash or such. The issue that I've had, though, that we haven't quite been able to answer is, if you have a conditional use process, what would be the stipulations that someone would need to meet in order to qualify? And again, I know what I was thinking towards, the HEB, that kind of thing, but if you say you have to be more than a gas station. Well, most gas stations are.
Yeah.
You know, they're convenience stores, they sell breakfast tacos, and so there wasn't necessarily a good answer. And I was trying just so this doesn't, you know, one day come back to bite us and we lose out on something that we might have needed here in Kyle. But I couldn't come up with a good answer, and so if we can come up with one, that's perfectly fine. If we don't have a solution, that is fine as well. Council can definitely re-examine this when they see fit. But if we have an idea that we can take to them, that would be great. If not, I would absolutely be fine with letting this go for at least for now. So if anyone has any thoughts, please feel free to share.
I could see if it was not even an H-E-B, but another a real grocery store in an area of the community that needed a grocery store. I mean, those gas pumps are a revenue generator, and if we wanted to attract a real grocery store, full grocery store, another market, an Aldi's, or you know, something else, into an area of Kyle that does not have that resource, that's more of a food desert, that would be something we could say, okay, we'll let you have, you know, but, you know, it would have to serve, the rest of it would have to serve Kyle for more than convenience, I guess is what I'm saying. It would have to be a need that we had. That would be my thought.
Would one of the,
Yes.
well, would one of the questions be something along the lines of what's the minimum square footage for a big box grocer, or something to that effect? Figure out what that average is across the US and then go from there?
Right.
Maybe lower that number a little bit, and then,
That is probably the best solution that, I was thinking anything along those same lines. I couldn't come up with much better than that. You have to, it still might knock out some of the options I think we might want in Kyle,
Yeah.
but at least it would be an answer because, you know, East Kyle could definitely use more, you know, more things, especially in certain parts of it, and there are areas that could. But how do we say this person might qualify, or this company might qualify, but not this one? Square footage is a possibility.
But is the square footage just solely for, you know, what if, is it just one business? What about it's a, you know,
Strip mall.
yeah, like a strip mall, and it's, you know, a convenience store, nail salon, you know, some other thing, and then, oh, by the way, we're all combining, you know, or one of us is gonna
Yeah.
own
We can-
the gas pumps.
we could stipulate that. You know, if you know, it's pretty typical that an H-E-B, at least, or larger grocers nowadays have ancillary gas pumps.
Right.
H-E-B, I think here is, I'm guessing, mind you, it's over 100,000 square feet.
Right, and
And so is Walmart.
So what we're saying is it must be combined with another applicable use.
It could be. We need to double check it with legal, but that might be worth taking a look at.
So here's my concern.
yes, sir.
We're essentially saying your NOI needs to be in the hundreds of millions, billion-dollar companies are the only ones we're gonna let build gas stations in our community. That doesn't fly for me. I get what you're saying, yes, well, but why are you bowing? Mom and pop 2 pumps are just as important as H-E-B's pumps. I see us being, you get into arbitrary and capricious territory here when you're saying, if you're a billion-dollar corporation, we'll work with you, but if you're Jane that's lived in the community 30 years and you happen to have a
Okay.
commercial lot, no, sorry, you can't put your gas station because you're not going to generate billions of dollars for it.
The only,
Or billions, you know what I mean?
That's absolutely why I was against this in the first place.
Yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying. But had Costco not have been building it, had they come to us next month and say, we would like to build, but I'm sorry, you can't have your gas pumps, QT is right next door, you can't have it. It is possible we could have lost them. I have no idea how important their gas pumps were to them. But if it was important, and that's what I'm trying to avoid. And I understand what you're saying, and that's why I was fearful of I understand the pros also. You know, I don't want a 2-pump gas station on all 4 corners of our intersections. Absolutely. But I'm afraid of that the cost is, you know, the unforeseen consequences are more than we were expecting. And so I was trying to find a way around that, but I understand your thought, and that's why I was against it from the first place. But since we are where we are, I'm just afraid of missing out on something that would be a good benefit to our community because of this rule in place.
Would they not be able to have to request a variance on that if they wanted something? I mean, if you put it in saying they can't be within X miles or X, half a mile or a mile, whatever it might be, but a company wants to come in or mom and pop wants to put something in, can't they apply for a zoning variance to be able to say, we're gonna do this and put that there even though we're within those boundaries?
Here's a scenario, and it's already in the code, which is, must prove X number, they prove that.
5K
portion, right? Yeah.
estimate, yeah.
Which would allow for another HEB, because right now with Costco, thinking that HEB is coming anytime soon, I think
No, absolutely.
it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Especially with Costco coming in, right?
Right.
Even on the east side, roofs equals dollars, and Kyle doesn't have the roofs to support another HEB on top of the one we have, plus a Costco. But who could sneak in is mom and pop with 2 pumps, who says HEBs, oh, hey, rooftops are gonna be there. They don't get their application in before mom and pop does. Mom and pop gets the spot. HEB now falls within that.
Absolutely.
You're too close.
And the 5,000 is good because as we grow, it gives more opportunities. But like an HEB specifically, or any kind of grocery store, doesn't just serve that 1/2 mile.
Quarter of the city.
Right. The HEB in our city, so,
Yeah.
goes through Kyle, even beyond Kyle. People
San
still come.
Marcos, yeah.
Absolutely. And so the 5,000 is good for when that happens, but
Yeah.
that's really good for that mom and pop gas station. It's not necessarily same thing that should be applicable to HEB because it's such a wider area they service.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
In the last 5 years, how many mom and pop gas station applications have you received?
How do you define mom and pop?
Let's just say 4 pumps or less.
Very few, because most of them are about 8. Well,
So are we
eight
over-
parking stalls. I'm still trying to figure out, and mostly because I haven't done the research, but is a pump two parking stalls?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so 4, they're usually on average about 4 pumps for 8 cars
Yeah.
over underneath one canopy. That's pretty typical. Four to 6.
And a lot of times they're locally owned franchises, and those
Yeah,
are
they're
small
franchised.
businesses. They're locally owned franchises, so a family can own them.
My
Just
worry
like
is
Sonic and-
over-programming something we're not getting a lot of.
We're getting a lot of requests for gas stations.
Well, I
And
mean-
mostly on the local scale, actually.
My concern, and I don't know, maybe this is totally off subject or out of bounds, but do we have restrictions on how close they can be to residential neighborhoods? And can that be incorporated into this?
Sort of, not from a distance perspective, but if they are adjacent to, they share a property boundary with residential uses, then they have to have site design metrics built into it. They have to have a solid screening fence 6 to 8 feet high, and they have to have landscaping buffer on the inside of the property line. That'll, at maturity, will help deaden noise, light mitigation, sound mitigation, stuff like that.
Right, because I guess what I don't want to see is to have a proliferation of gas stations going into brand-new neighborhoods. It's one thing if there's a gas station there and you build a neighborhood next to it.
Right.
You know what
Because
you're
they were
getting
there
into.
first, yeah.
But if you build a neighborhood and then there's a piece of property that could be zoned for a gas station,
Mm-hmm.
that's going to impact everybody that's living in that area.
And that was largely what council was, that was kind of their mindset. They didn't want to see, they used the example of East F 150. It seems like anything commercial popping up on there is a gas station.
All right.
So- And they're not wrong, because they're the first ones that go in. From a practical perspective, they're the easiest, I'm not gonna say lowest common denominator, but they're the easiest commercial entity that can go in, be in the vanguard of commercial development
Right.
to establish, because there's the residences right there. It's convenience for a reason. You get your gas on your way home, or when you're leaving, and the workday's right there, that kind of stuff.
It's a low risk.
Yeah.
Opening a gas station is pretty low risk.
And bring this forward, it was not my intent to go against what the council wished. The council doesn't necessarily want there to be the gas stations, all these places, and I understand their reasoning, and I'm just trying to make something in case I don't want this to have unintended consequences for them. But, that's what this council decided. Maybe future council will change things a bit. But in the meantime, can we come up with a solution to help them with these? But you are correct. I do not think HEB is going to come tomorrow and say, hey, we're ready to build HEB 2 for Kyle. But the HEB is just a prime example.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are plenty of things I'm not thinking of. And plus, I'm not only talking about gas stations. Yes, Buc-ee's, absolutely. It could be because had New Braunfels have had this rule in place, Buc-ee's wouldn't have been able to go in because there was a gas station across the street.
Yeah.
And so, but this is not just for, this is mainly for gas stations. But also, I put all three on the item. I put gas station, car wash, and self-storage facilities. I can't see the situation where we would miss out on an opportunity because of self-storage facilities. But I think it is possible with both gas stations and car washes. I think, an HEB, that kind of place, might want to put both those in. And so I just thought we should discuss, I put all three of them on there. But it's really the gas station mainly, car wash is secondary, that I think may affect something in the future that we might miss.
I'm okay with keeping all of the restrictions for car washes. Like, I think that's enough of a luxury item that I'm not really as worried about it. Whereas gas is one of those things where, you want to have it near your house. So like, when we limit gas stations, we also put pressure as we continue building on current gas stations. So are we going to have gas stations essentially popping up in a grid form? Like, how are we going to be able to get all of that demand serviced? Like, that is the one thing I worry about. The other two, I'm like,
We did not, with this code amendment, did not put limits on how many pumps they can have. If they have, now this, you have to be forward thinking if you're developing a gas station now in Kyle. Because if you have extra land available, then you could have an expansion of it. Because you're already there. You can have an expansion of it to where you can add more pumps. So because you were there from
Okay.
it's based on the property line edge, and then you draw a buffer around it of a half-mile radii.
so we're going to get rid of all the parking in HEB and fill it with gas pumps. One of these days, if it gets big enough. Like,
Doubtful.
that's an extreme example. but it's
It
still one of those
is
things.
because the code already accounts for higher population. Higher population triggers the ability to build an additional gas station.
Yeah. So it
That's
says,
infill, because what we have now is already single-family houses proliferating out.
Yeah.
right, but if you, based on the creation, the date of creating this amendment, if a certain area adds an estimated 5,000 person population,
Yeah.
we just say, yeah, you can build a gas station. We don't put any additional stipulations on it, other than it was already in the zoning code from a site development perspective.
I mean, you're not adding 5,000 units around the HEB area,
Yeah.
right? So HEB isn't gonna, and it isn't, I don't know if it's the most popular. Sunoco by me, or Conoco by me, tends to be busy all the time, and that's when I go to personally, so. But I get what you're saying, but as the community grows out, those gas stations are gonna go where the people are. We're not gonna centralize them.
Yeah.
You know?
So going back to the heart of the item, do we, would we want for there to be a way for certain businesses to at least ask, can we? Because right now, from what I'm saying, just based on code, doesn't matter if you're RS or where you are, if you are within that range for gas stations, car washes, or self-storage units, the answer is just no, you can't build that here. And so there's no process to ask, well, our situation is different. Could we, so one, do you even want to recommend to council that there be a process like that? And then two, are we, is the square footage a possible reason as to how someone can request or not? Or so, yeah, do we even agree with this in the first place?
And I'll be frank, I asked internally, I asked this question.
Yes, sir.
I said, hey, do we need to, is it a geographic frequency perspective? Like, or is it how the gas station, the site development itself presents itself? If we, and I use this example all the time, in my mind, from an urban form perspective, my degree is in urban planning. Like, I want to see walkable, pedestrian, pull the building up to the street, the right-of-way edge, wide sidewalk, street trees, all, beautiful down, hill country downtown kind of stuff, right?
Yes, sir.
It sounds odd, but if we did the same thing for gas stations, but you forced the pumps to be either in the back at the back of the lot, or to the side, depending on site constraints, but not up front where they usually are, and you pulled the building up to the right-of-way edge and made it activate the street where everybody's, if they're walking into it, that's not normal. That is not standard at all, not at all. And I'm not sure how much traction it would get. But I use it as a relatively extreme example. Like if we tweaked the site development designs versus, and if they met those, that would be a conditional use permit, or they were just allowed to do it. Maybe it's a combination of the 5,000 and that perspective. I don't know.
I think you need to be very specific, so.
Yeah.
Actually very related. I was just having a conversation with somebody about this on some legal documents for something similar. And it was, in the documents, it said, well, hardships can be considered. Well, what's a hardship?
Yes.
What is that? That's again, that gives you the opportunity to be arbitrary and capricious
Yes.
in your decision making. So instead of that, we put in very specific, this is what not the hardship, but here's the plan, no matter what your hardship is this is how it goes. Here's the list of criteria. If we could put together a list, I think that's something that at least I would personally say, yeah, let's take a look at. But then as council,
Right,
willing
absolutely.
to look at.
Yes,
Yeah.
no, I understand that.
Yeah.
I was given the direction for geographic spacing.
Okay.
I'll say that.
So
Which
even-
is why it's drafted.
Even if it's behind the building, it should still be a mile or so from the next gas station? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. Like,
Oh, okay.
is the half mile to miles, the mile spacing essentially
It's a
between
mile
property
spacing.
line to property line. It's just
Yes.
how that's just how it drafted. It's a half mile radius, but a mile diameter, right?
Absolutely.
So, is it a function, do you replace the 5,000 person estimate rule with, okay, yes, you can build a gas station. Maybe then it's, that population estimate is reduced. But to do that, to get that reduction, then you comply with these extra site constraints. I don't know.
It kind of begs the question, do we have any indication that we need more gas stations? in
If
this
you
community?
ask the
I mean, other than
convenience
ask-
store
I mean,
companies, yes.
has there been any public cry saying, we need more, or does council feel that we need more, or is it the opposite?
It's not that Facebook is any indication, because it's not as statistically relevant.
Unless you're Zuckerberg.
I mean, there's nothing, we had a retail study. There was one of the backup documents. We only need at this time around 15 or so, based on the national average population per C-store gas station. We have 26.
Okay, but I had issues with that study. I mean, one, I do not believe, there was nowhere in that study I found that it recognized that we were an I-35 community. Yeah, I-35 community is very different than a community somewhere off of I-35, somewhere away from the I-35. It also, and also, again, just as when council discussed this, we were talking about gas stations as if they are all the same.
And they're not.
And they are not. And so yes, that report did say we had too many gas stations. But I think there were factors that were not a part of that study.
Number of pumps.
Absolutely, number of pumps and just the fact that we are where we are. Because yes, there may be a gas station somewhere, like the one that's in front of the flea market. Okay, so that's right off of 35, but if you're on the other side of 35, getting to that gas station is definitely not a very convenient thing. But within a half mile, within a mile, it's a lot of distance. And so there are situations where I think that, there are nuanced situations where I think we might be able to need more. But as a whole, does our city need more number of gas stations? No, maybe not. But So.
I hate to say your example, there's an Arco and then the Walmart one right next to each other.
Right, no, absolutely,
But I get what
but
you're. I get
if
what
that
you're
was the
trying to
only
say.
gas station,
Yeah.
hypothetically, a mile from that location
Yeah.
is a lot of space.
Yeah.
And so, but yes, you are right, there are gas stations on the other side of 35.
Yeah. That's always been my biggest, right, and I think I mentioned that before. I-30, the corridor, having so many gas stations, and I mentioned it during the workshop, what nice restaurant's gonna wanna be off the I-35 if their neighbor's the gas station. It's gonna be very,
Just gas station.
yeah.
And you know, I don't want to get off topic here, but if we say, oh, no, I'm sorry, you can't put a gas station in this location.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'm gonna put a mattress store instead. You know, how have we done any better?
Right.
You know, Castle Dental or whoever is gonna go in around 35 and, or that kind of thing. And so, I understand the thought of, we don't want this here, so let's say no to this. But there's a lot of things we could be saying no to. And I understand, and so we're not gonna get gas pumps, you know, gas stations popping up everywhere. But I still would like someone to be able to say, hey, my situation is unique. I can bring a lot to Kyle, more than just a gas pump. I would like to be able to at least pitch that idea to you. But it is very hard to figure out what would then qualify.
I will say I agree with that specific part of this and probably about no other part of the exceptions. Only because I drive about a mile from my house to Quick Trip anyway to get gas, and it's nothing. Like, we're arguing over scraps in terms of like going a mile. You get a dingo 25 miles out. That's 25 of those. 25 miles is basically from near south of downtown Austin to here, like on that ding. But a mile is really not that large. It's not that big of a deal. The exception I think is important here is that, like, if you're gonna do something more than a gas station, you should be allowed to do that. It's important where there is, gas station is a secondary aspect. Like, I actually like the idea of having the more geared towards like a walkable, like a mixed use style community where it's at, because like then it becomes a convenience store for us gas station second. Like, it's serving another need. And that to me is more important than having just another gas station. Like, I think that's where the exception comes.
So if you guys have more discussion, that's fine. But from what I can gather here, we have some thoughts, but we do not have anything ready to go to a voting meeting at all. So this may come back at another workshop. You know, I'd be happy to kind of talk about this, but it seems like if this does come back, to come back to another workshop, we might have better guidance then.
Not that we're allowed to provide direction in a workshop meeting, but it's not a bad idea if you end up doing some research and you come up with some examples of alternatives to it. We can talk about it at another workshop.
Yeah, because I can see giving council some tools, you know, I mean, if they have an opportunity come, if they don't have tools, you know, they can choose to use it or not, right? The conditional use or the conditional, I mean, it's not a given.
Correct.
So if we give them something that they can use at their discretion, you know, it's a tool that they could use if something comes along. So I don't know what the criteria is, but I am in favor of creating tools that give flexibility.
To incentivize.
Pardon?
To incentivize.
Yeah, to incentivize something that's an opportunity for Kyle, that's something we'd really like. I keep thinking of a grocery store on the east side. Not an H-E-B, but, you know, a nice, decent grocery store on the east side.
Absolutely. Okay, good. Any other discussion? All right. Item number 5, adjournment. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It's been motioned by myself, seconded by Commissioner Chase. Is there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
I don't think I've ever seen an example